So I just hit that recording button. Yes. And thank you for the reminder, because sometimes I do need a reminder. So we should be. Yep, we are recording. Awesome.
My pleasure.
Great. Okay, so hello everyone, welcome. And I will go ahead and go into slideshow mode. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, so we will go over that assignment, don't worry. And I do see a question about pacing. We did start off a bit slower, but we will pick up the pace as it goes on. So hello everyone, just a reminder of our rules and expectations for the class. Stay muted if you're not speaking, use the raise hand button. If you'd like to ask a question or type questions in the chat. I can't always see the questions in the chat, but I do have my lovely TAs that are monitoring that for me. Check the syllabus for any questions that you may have about the class, or also to find the Google Drive where you can access these slides. And so you can follow along with me if you would like. So for today's class, you will need Replit. We're also going to start using ChatGPT. I'll show you how to do that. It's pretty neat. So go ahead and get logged into both of those things. I did have ChatGPT as optional. So if you did not choose to sign up for ChatGPT, that is okay. You can just watch what I do with it and then decide for yourself if you'd like to. I will note that ChatGPT does have some paid tiers, so do keep that in mind. I think you can get by with the free one with a limited amount of requests to their server, but let's go ahead and get started. So for last week's assignment, it was to write Python code that prints the grade for a quiz in which a student received 19 out of 20 questions correct. And then I tell you what your code should contain, and then ask you to print out the value of the variable score. So I'm going to show you how I would code this. So I'm going to go ahead and create a REPL, search for Python, and I'm going to call this assignment 1 and create. So as I'm waiting for that to create, here we go. Okay, so let's see, we want a variable named number correct assigned to the value 19. So to do this, I'm going to create this variable by just typing number underscore correct equals 19. The next variable we need is total questions assigned to the value 20. So I'm going to create a variable called total questions. And remember, you assign values to variables with this equal sign, also called the assignment operator. So 20 is the total number of questions. And let's see, now we need, all right, apologies for that. And then now we need a variable score, which is equal to number correct divided by total questions. So now we have number, I need to assign it to score. So score equals number correct divided by using the slash and then total questions. And you can do math on these variables just like you would with the values that they're assigned to. So now I have score equals number correct divided by total questions. And if I want to print that, I'm going to say print score. And let's just make sure that is what I need to do. Print out the value of the variable score. So now if I run this, 0.95. And there was a little bonus here that said extra print out the phrase the score is before you print the score. That is just because sometimes you may want to write code that's a little more understandable what it's doing. Oops, don't erase your variables. So if you wanted to do that, there's a couple different ways. And I saw some very creative ways from other people, but you can, the simplest way is to just say the score is. And then if we run this, now we can see we have a little thing that says the score is and 0.95. So that is how I would code up this assignment. All right, do I have any questions about the assignment? And I did see some people said they don't know what to do with it. You don't have to do anything with it. So the assignments are for yourself to learn and make sure you understand. So if your code works, that's great. If you would like to send me your assignments either via Discord or email, you're welcome to do that as well. That also goes for our completely asynchronous students who are just watching this recording. You are welcome to send me your code if you want me to look over it and provide feedback. Otherwise, it is pretty much up to you what you do with the code. You just write it, see if it works. If it does, then you're good. So any questions about this assignment? Any at all? If not, that's okay. As always, you can put them in the chat or raise your hand. All right, so going to show something else now. So still talking about this assignment, but I just programmed kind of manually. I typed in all of the commands myself, but there's actually a new workflow for programmers that I think is going to pretty much take over the computer science industry. And this is called AI-assisted programming. The AI in question, ChatGPT, others such as Bing GPT, Google Bard, GitHub Copilot is another great one. And GitHub Copilot, by the way, is available for free if you're a student and you have a student email address. So yes, go ahead if you have a ChatGPT account, go ahead and access that now. We will be using it. If you don't have a ChatGPT account, that is just fine. Just watch what I did here. So I'm going to show you some magic, some coding magic. So what I did was I went to ChatGPT. I copied and pasted, I copied and pasted this exact thing. I just ripped it out of the PowerPoint, this assignment, and I pasted it into ChatGPT. I said, do this, and I said, enter. And here's what ChatGPT gave me. Not only did it give me Python code that works, it also explained the code to me. It said, here's Python code that fulfills your requirements. And it gave me the code that I need. This is number correct, 19, total questions equals 20. This is almost exactly what I did when I wrote it myself. There's even a button over here to copy the code to your clipboard. And then it even tells me what the code will output. It says the score is 0.95. This is amazing. When I was learning coding, nothing like this existed. A year ago, nothing like this existed. This is mind-blowingly cool that we're able to do this, focus on, coming up with the prompt and maybe how to solve a problem, give it to ChatGPT and it writes the Python code for us. Of course, you want to test this code. Don't just take it and say, oh, here's my code. I'm not going to run it to see if it works. You need to run it. Even if ChatGPT says what the output is, do check it. Copy that code, put it into your replit. But this is pretty amazing that it's able to do this. And it even gives a little explanation of what it does. It says the score is calculated by dividing the number of correct answers, number correct, by the total number of questions, called total questions. In this case, the student score is 0.95 or 95%. That is so cool. So I wanted to show you this part too. You can even ask it more questions about the code if you're confused. It's kind of like having your own little, tutor or assistant that you can ask questions to and get really great answers. So I said, this is my chat here. I said, in the code above, explain why you put the score is followed by a comma, followed by the variable score. So I'm asking about this line. I said, why did you do this, ChatGPT? What if I don't understand what that means? And then it said, sure. In this code provided, this is why I did this. The print function can accept multiple arguments separated by commas, and it will print them out with a space between each argument. By using a comma after the score is, we're telling Python to print the score is, followed by a space, and then print the value of score. Amazing. So if you have questions about code, you can even ask it questions about code. And so then I asked, how would I give this score as a percentage? And now it says to display the score as a percentage, you can multiply score variable by 100 and use string formatting to include the percentage symbol. Here's an updated version of the code. How nice of ChatGPT. So now it gives me an updated version of the code that will do exactly what I want by saying the score is 95% instead of saying 0.95 as the score. And it'll explain this to you as well. So wow, that's really powerful. And it's really great when you're learning coding to be able to have a resource like this where you say, oh, I don't exactly remember how to do this, or I'm unsure how to do this other thing. What should I do? Ask ChatGPT. It's not cheating. You're using this as a resource, and I highly encourage you to do this. I truly believe this is going to be the future of programming. So of course, I want you to learn the basics of Python, but there's nothing wrong with using ChatGPT to help you get there if you're stuck. So something to consider. So I wanted to give you a chance to play around with this. So go ahead and go to chat.openai.com if you have access to it. Other ones that you may have access to are Bing GPT using the Edge browser, Google Bard, GitHub Copilot, whichever one you want. I will be using ChatGPT for the class. And then ask it to write Python code and take this code and then paste it into your Replit Python file and run it. What do you notice? Does the code run? Does it do what you intended? So go ahead and do that. I'll give you about 5 minutes maybe to play around with ChatGPT, ask it to write some code. You don't have to do these prompts if you don't want to. You can come up with your own, but I put these down here for you to see in case you like just got stuck on coming up with some. So I'd be really interested. And then when you have your results, go ahead and put them in the chat for me so we can all see what ChatGPT gave you. What question did you ask it? What code did it give you? And did it run? I'm really interested to know. So I'll give you about 5 minutes. So at 5:18, I'm not going anywhere, but at 5:18, I'll read over the chat and see what people are sharing. So as you do this, go ahead and put in the chat what some of your results are. So I'll go ahead and show you if I'm going to do this. So I'll take this one. So I'll work on mine, and you can either follow along with me or do your own. And then I really want to know how it turned out. So let's see, go to ChatGPT. Yeah, interesting. So Michael put some code in the chat that ChatGPT gave. Michael, did you get a chance to run this code and put it into Replit? I'm curious to see if it works. It looks pretty similar to what it gave me, but a little bit different. That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, I definitely encourage you. So we can click on copy code here, and then we can put it into our Replit. So I'm just going to get rid of this here. Paste it in. Let's see what happens. Oh, it works. Really neat, really neat. Yeah, so we can see in that one, it was defining a function, which is really cool. We haven't even covered that yet. Let's see. Yeah, and so someone else did the average of 3 numbers. Ooh, okay. Let's see. Someone did code for turning hours into years.
You have that on your neck. Come here. Right.
Someone did hours to years. Okay, someone said they tried to do one and it didn't work. Yeah, that's okay. Sometimes it doesn't work. It does really well with basic things, not so well with others. So I'm going to pull this code here, the hours to years one that someone put in the chat. Let's see if this one runs. I'm going to paste that in there. Let's see if that runs. Oh, so interesting. So this is something, it didn't print it out. So if we wanted to print, we would say print hours to years. And then give it a number or something. So let's do a lot of that. And now if I run it, it'll go. So sometimes you have to mess around with it. And if you gave this, so let's say I give this to ChatGPT. Let's say I don't understand why this didn't print something for me. That's okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, some people are still making their account. That's all right. So let's say I get this, and this is some code. We haven't even covered functions yet. We don't know what they are. All I know is that when I click run on this, it doesn't do anything. Why doesn't it do anything? So I'm going to go over to ChatGPT, and I'm going to say, here is Python code. Why doesn't it print out the, let's see, what is the code actually doing? The hours to years at the end. And then I'm going to paste in the code. Oops. Oh my goodness. So now it says, I meant to put enter between these two so that I had a new line, but I accidentally just sent it in. And now it says the code you provided defines a function that takes a number of hours and calculates the equivalent number of years based on the assumption that there are 60 hours in a year. To print out the result, you need to do this. And so it actually tells you what you need to do and then gives you updated code for how to do this. Although I do already see an error, a typo. Does anybody see? Let's see. Oh, wait, no, never mind. That's not a typo. I thought it was replacing this, but it's not. It's putting that in as an argument. Okay, let's just see. So if we take that, the code that ChatGPT gave us, and then I'm going to paste it in there. Let's see if this works. There we go. Pretty crazy. So even if you are struggling during this course, maybe Python doesn't 100% make sense to you all the time, ChatGPT, amazing resource for explaining code to you, for generating new code, for helping you problem solve. Yay! So a bunch of people. Oh yeah, they do have a pretty in-depth CAPTCHA, not a human, not a robot verification thing. But yeah, so I really hope that you continue to use this. Do note that it keeps track of how many messages you've sent. So right now I'm on kind of an unlimited plan because my job pays for it, but you may be on a more restricted plan where maybe you only get a certain number of messages per hour or day or something. It really just depends. So do keep that in mind, that you may hit a limit and then it says, oh, you can't send any more messages. So that is a sad part of that. I believe Bing GPT, which is in the Edge browser, you can Google that. But if you use the Edge browser, which who uses Edge browser now? People use it because of Bing. Who knew? You can actually access their AI called Bing GPT for free, I am pretty sure. Okay, so that is just something that I wanted to show you real quickly that you can use throughout this entire class. Is AI assisted programming. So I think this is super cool. I'm going to be doing workshops on it and conferences that I'm going to. Really excited about AI assisted programming. So are there any questions about this before we move on to the rest of the class? And thank you so much for putting all of your code and results into the chat. Okay, yeah, so sometimes you can put stuff in there and it doesn't exactly know, especially if it's something more scientific or requires very specific knowledge, it may not know it if you give it context. So one thing about working with AI models is you really need to pay attention to the prompts that you give it. The output that you will get from the AI will be just as good as the prompt that you give it. So the prompt that we gave it for our Python code was very detailed. It was this whole assignment right here. And so that's very detailed. It gave us very good code for that. ChatGPT can't read your mind, and it doesn't necessarily always know the facts that it needs to. So you do sometimes have to say, I want you to do this, and here is how you could do it, write this code. That's something to keep in mind. You will have to play around with how you send prompts to ChatGPT, and it's kind of fun to mess around with it. Okay, any other questions? And yes, as Hunter said, it is always good to check what it gives you because it might give you incorrect information. So I don't endorse using this for finding facts. ChatGPT is not for finding facts, but it is a good tool for generating basic Python code and then testing that code yourself. So you will want to think of how can I make sure that this code does run the way I want to? What outputs are you expecting? And we will, continue to iterate in that way. So don't just take what it outputs and then use that as fact. Yes, exactly. AIR tools. So super excited about that. Okay, so then if there's no questions, and of course, raise your hand if you do have a question or put it into the chat, then we'll just go ahead and review kind of what we did last time and then move on to some new things. So last week, we discussed kind of the basics of Python, how we write Python inside of a .py file using some sort of software. In our case, we use Replit. Python code is separated by spaces. So right now we've just seen that we separate different lines. So different commands are on different lines in a Python file. And then when we run our code, the computer is going to execute those instructions line by line. We also discussed different data types. We have int or integer, which is a whole number, float or floating point number, which is a decimal, a string, which is, it says str stands for string, that is anything in quotes. So words in quotes, anything in quotes. Bool or Boolean is a true or false value, and we will look more into those today as well, but that is literally just true, capital T, RUE in Python, no quotes. Those are called Boolean values. Then there's just two, true and false. And so these are the different data types that we can work with inside Python. And we will discuss more today why those matter and what we can do with these different data types. Another thing that we discussed last week was variables, which allow you to assign a value to a variable name. So you'll come up with your variable name, just like in the assignment that we did where we had number underscore correct. That was the name of our variable. We assigned it using the equal sign or the assignment operator to the value 19. And then that gave us that variable assigned to that value. So it uses the assignment operator. Python will then recognize that variable name as the value you assigned it, and you can use it just as you would the value that it represents. So here's an example. If I say A equals 1 and B equals 2, then I can print A plus B, and that will print 1 plus 2, or the answer to that, 3. So you can use variables as just as you would these values here. Okay, so that is the end of our review of last week. Do we have any questions about what we did last week? And of course, the recording is up on YouTube. You're welcome to watch that if you want a more in-depth review. But if you have any overarching questions, maybe something still doesn't make sense to you, please just let me know. All right, I'm seeing no questions. Yes. And of course, my great TAs will always be available in this chat and in Discord, or as much as they can be available. Okay, so then let's go ahead. Looks like I don't have any questions so far. So some people are having trouble using ChatGPT. That's okay. We may just need to troubleshoot that after the class or maybe in Discord sometime. It's not required for the class, but it is a useful tool. All right, so now let's go ahead into int and float operations. So integers and floats or decimals can be in the same operations. You know, you can add 5.0 plus 7 times 0.01 divided by 9. That is totally okay. They can be in the same operations. We treat them just as numbers. But this answer, so the answer to this, or the output of this operation as a whole, will either be a float or an int itself. And if it's going to be a float or an int kind of depends on what went into that operation. And this is very Python specific. So if you are assigning a variable to be the answer to this operation up here, this is kind of what we can expect the answer to be, what type the answer will be. And we will play around with this as well. So if you add, subtract, or multiply only integers, so just 2 times 5 times 100, no decimal points, that will give you an integer. This is for addition, subtraction, and multiplication when the only numbers in that operation are whole numbers or integers. Then that answer will be an integer. If you have any operations combining integer and float, anything where you have a decimal and an integer, whenever there's a decimal, the answer will also have a decimal. Even if it seems like it's going to be an even decimal, like 5.0, it still counts as a float, even though you could say it's an int, it's not an int, it's a float. So any operations in which you have integers and floats together, the answer will be a float. And then finally, if you divide only integers, that answer will also be a float. So if I have like a equals 10 divided by 5, even though 10 divided by 5 is a whole number in Python, it will give you the answer as 2.0, or sometimes it'll just say 2 and then a decimal point. This is just because of how Python calculates division, and it's not really something we have to worry about, but just know if you add, subtract, and multiply only integers, your answer will be an integer. Any operations containing a float will be a float. And then if you're dividing integers, that answer will be a float as well. So I have a nice little chart of operations. Let's see, waiting for my slides to advance. There we go. Okay, my slides advanced. All right. So as we talked about, int and floats use mathematical operations. So this is just like what you would expect if you're typing into your calculator. And there are two at the bottom here that we did not cover last time that I will briefly go over. And so as I said before, they can be in the same operation. If there's ever a float in the operation, though, the overall answer will be a float. And then these bottom two are called integer division and modulo. You may or may not have heard of these because they're not as widely talked about. Integer division is represented by 2 slashes. So instead of 1 slash for division, 2 slashes means integer division. And this means that you just round it to I believe it's the bottom integer. So if it's 2 point anything, it will just round it to 2. So even if it's 2.9, it just rounds to 2. So you just take off that floating point value at the end and you make it an integer. And that is called integer division. We'll look at examples of it. And if you don't quite get it, it's okay. You can just experiment around with it and see what Python outputs. That's a great way to learn, is just put an operation into a print statement and see what comes out. The next one is what you might call a percent sign, but in Python that stands for modulo, which is a fancy way of saying the remainder. So how you read this is you say 5 modulo 2, and that just means if you were to divide 5 by 2, what is the remainder? So sometimes that's a little weird to get your head around it. So 2 will go into 5 2 times, and that'll be 4. And that remainder is 1. So 5 modulo 2 is 1. And you can get some more practice with this as well on in the Python itself. So we will go over that. Okay, so any questions on the symbols, on operations so far, and then we'll practice it all together. Okay. Yes, so someone asked about integer division, and good, we did cover that. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions so far. As always, please raise your hand if you have questions or put them in the chat. So let's practice this a little bit. Let's see. So for this one, I'm going to give in this left column here, I'm going to give you an operation where I'm assigning a variable to x. I'm assigning a value to the variable x. In this column, I want you to tell me what the value of x would be after this operation, and then what type x would be after we do this operation. So everyone put in the chat what this value would be here. When we do x equals 5 plus 7.0, what would x be? If we said print x, what would that be? Go ahead and put in the chat. Yep. People are putting some stuff in the chat. Thank you. Awesome. We give just a couple more seconds. Go ahead and put in the chat what this answer will be. And I think some people are like, I know how to do math. That's not why I'm here. Not here for math. It's okay. We'll get through the math. So yes, it's 12.0. So make sure you have that 0.0. That's very important because what type does that make this? It makes it a float. So 5 plus 7.0, we have a float in our operation. So our final answer will be a float. All right, for the next one, x equals 10 minus 6. What will that value and variable type be? Go ahead and put in the chat. It's okay if you're bad at math. That's why we have Python. Python can help us do math. Awesome. What will the answer to this be? And what will the variable type be of x after this? Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for putting your answers in the chat. I love this. You guys are always so, you always participate. It makes me so happy. So yes, if you said 4, no decimal point, 4, we just have integers in this operation and it's subtraction. Answer is 4, x is equal to 4, and x is an integer, an int. Okay, so we'll kind of move through the rest of these quickly because it seems like you're getting it. I want to get to the more fun examples at the bottom. X equals 3 times 12. Go ahead and put in what the value and variable type of x will be after x is 3 times 12. All right, what is x going to be? And what type? Yep. You are correct. We have 36 and it will be an integer. Okay, and now if we do 3 times 12.5, I don't require you to do that math in your head, but we can already kind of tell there's a float in this operation here. So what will that make our variable type over here? It will be, yes, thank you everyone. It will be a float. Okay, so now some other ones. So how about 12 divided by 4? X equals 12 divided by 4. Remember the rules about how we determine what the variable type will be. So what will be the value and the variable type of x for 12 divided by 4? So 12 divided by 4, what will be that value and variable type? Thank you so much for your answers. I love this. Love it. So it seems like we're a bit divided here. We're a bit divided as to what this will be. Will it be an int or a float? Well, if you recall from our rules last time, with integers, division will always return. Okay, my slides will load. It will always return a float. So this will always mess people up. It messes me up sometimes, and it's okay if you mess up on this. 12 divided by 4, Python will make x equal to 3 dot or 3.0. Sometimes it won't put the 0 there, but it's still equal to 3.0, and it is a float, actually. That's a little frustrating, a little weird to think about, but just know with division, always returns a float. So the next case we have, that's important to remember, but it's not a huge deal if it messes you up. People forget all the time. Next one, 10 divided by 3. Think about it. And you guys are doing this. Yep. Yes, so this one will give us a decimal and that will be a float. I'm just going to kind of speed through the rest of these, and if you want to go over the slides afterwards, you're welcome to and test yourself. So we have for this one, 4, oh, I didn't mean to give that answer away. I wanted to ask you, what do you think? I accidentally clicked on it again. Whoops, oh well, you see it. But if we have 4 squared, remember the star is exponent, so that is 4 to the 2 power or 4 squared. And these are just integers. And exponentiation is the same as repeated multiplication. So you can kind of see with the 2 stars, it kind of makes sense. It's repeated multiplication. So 4 squared is 16, and Python will keep that as an integer. Awesome. This next one, 4 to the 0.5 power. Does anyone remember another way we could say this? 4 to the 0.5 power. What is another way to say 4 star and then 0.5? If we were just gonna say it in plain English, what would we say this is? Square root of 4. Yeah, thank you so much. Exactly, square root of 4, and the answer is 2, but will it be 2 no decimal or 2 with a decimal, making it a float? Amazing, amazing. It will be a float because we have a decimal right here, a float value. Whenever we have a float value in our operation, that will make the result of that operation a float as well. And I see some people are asking if we need the parentheses here. You don't need the parentheses. I always like to put them in just so I know what exactly I'm raising it to the power of, especially if I have more operations after this. So you don't have to, but I do sometimes. But you can see in this next one, I don't need the parentheses. So if we look at this, we can do the square root of 10, and that is a float. Next one, okay. Now we're looking at the more interesting ones. So 10, integer division 3. So this would be 10 divided by 3, but without any decimal afterwards. So what would the answer to this one be? What would x be in this case if it was 10 integer division 3? Thank you all for your answers. 10 integer division 3. And if you said 3 and int, you are correct. So integer division, if we say 10 divided by 3, that will be, as we saw up here, 3.33333. We did integer division, which just wipes out this decimal here and turns it into an integer. So this is not like rounding where you round to the nearest integer. This is something that's called a floor, which just pushes it down to the integer below it. So you just take off that decimal point. So that is 3. All right, and now for the last newish one, what is 7 modulo 2? So remember that is the remainder if you did 7 divided by 2. So remember remainders when you did long division in whatever grade we did that. What is the remainder when you divide 7 by 2? And will that be an int or a float? Amazing. You guys are really getting this. I'm super happy. So this will be 1. 7, the remainder of 7 divided by 2 is 1, and that will be an integer. Wonderful. So integer division and modulo, the last two ones that we just did, will always return an integer. I don't know what will happen if you do 10 integer division of 3.2 or 7 modulo 2.1. I've never encountered that in Python code before, so you can try it out and see what happens there. But if we just use integers here, it will always be an integer. So one thing I want to point out, you will be seeing modulo pretty frequently when we want to determine whether a number is even or odd. Because if you remember, an even number is always divisible by 2. And if something is perfectly divisible by 2, what would be the remainder when it's divided by 2? So if I had like 8 divided by 2 or 10 divided by 2, what would that remainder be? Yeah, exactly. It is 0. And so a lot of times in Python, if we want to determine if a number is even or not, we say that number modulo 2. And if it's equal to 1, we know the number is odd because there is a remainder. And if it's equal to 0, we know that number is even. So that's just a tip. You will see this in the future. Just a hint, just a glimpse at the future. You will probably see that because it's in code everywhere. Okay. So thank you so much for working with me on those. Do we have any questions about these float and int operations before we move on to strings? And I see someone asking about modulo, and modulo is not division, it is remainder. So you can imagine modulo as how much is left over if you divide some number by another one. And you can also Google modulo if you just need a bit more experience with that. Otherwise, it's you don't have to worry about it too much. Okay, does Python understand Gaussian integers or just float-based complex numbers? Gaussian integers are values combining real and imaginary numbers. I believe there is a library in Python that does imaginary numbers, although I have not worked with it that often. So I would encourage you to maybe do some research on this yourself or ask ChatGPT about this and see if that works. But we won't be using that in this class, but that is a great question. So yeah, Python may be interpreting that differently than we would on paper. I would honestly just have to look this up because I don't deal with a lot of imaginary numbers in my work. Okay. All right. Great. So now let's go on to string operations. I'm going to take a sip of water. So we have seen how we can do some mathematical operations on numbers like ints and floats, but we can really do those with strings. Strings generally cannot be an operation with a float or an int. And you know that really just makes no sense. You can't say 5.5 divided by the string high. That does not make any sense. But we can have operations between strings, and the main one is addition, or concatenation is usually the term that you'll hear. Strings can be concatenated or added to other strings. And this just means you take the first string and you squish it together with the second string. So I'll show you an example of this. If we have my string equals AB plus CD, then my string will be equal to ABCD. So if we said in Python, my string equals AB plus CD, and then print my string, Python will print the string ABCD. So it just squishes those two together. And you can do this as many times as you want with all kinds of strings. You can do this with spaces. And so that is the main operation that you'll see with strings until we go more in depth with strings later in the course. Another example, if we said x equals hello plus in quotes an exclamation mark, we can easily add an exclamation mark to the end of our variable or to the end of our greeting. So just something to have practice with is operating on strings just using the plus sign. And then also numbers inside of quotes are strings. So if you just wanted to add the number 3 to hello, you would just say plus 3 in quotes. So let's see what this looks like. So if I said A equals 5, that is now a string, not an int. So let's look at this in Replit real quick. So if I go over here, I'm just going to get rid of this. Oh, and it looks like it's having to boot back up. That's okay. And I'm connected again. So let's say I have a variable called string1, and I want that to be hello. And then I want string2 to be equal to world. Someone tell me, put in the chat, what will be the output of print string1 plus string2? What is that output? Go ahead and put in the chat what you think that output would be. What would happen if I said print string1 plus string2? Thank you, everyone. So I caught some of you. It will not have a space because there's no space in our string. So when we print this, we're just squishing them together and there's no spaces. So it's just going to be hello world, no space. So if we wanted a space in there, we could either add it to the end of hello like that, or we could add it to the beginning of world. So if I did this now where I have a space included and now I run it, there we go. It'll say hello world with a nice space in between. So it's readable for us humans. So like I said, you can do that at the end of one variable or the beginning of another. So if we did that, it should output the same thing, hello world. Could also do something like this. Space equals, and you can name this whatever you want. And now I can say string1 plus space plus string2. And it will squish all of those together in the order that I have said to. So that is one way of adding spaces into your strings and adding strings together in general. Okay, so we did that a little bit last time. So next I wanted to talk about escape characters. And escape characters are symbols or characters that you may want to represent in a Python string that you typically can't, just because Python assigns those to a special value. So a backslash, not a forward slash, a backslash allows you to include characters inside of strings that Python normally can't represent. So the first example that I have of this is double quotes. If a string is inside double quotes, how do you print double quotes? Stuff like that. So you could say a backslash double quote. One instance is if you want to add a new line, if you want to press like almost like you're pressing enter, Python will not let you because Python is separated by lines. So if we went out of our, so if I go back to Python here and I say string 1 equals hello and then enter, this is going to give me an error because Python is separated by lines and it says, hey, says syntax error, unterminated string literal. That sounds very scary, but all this is saying is that we didn't close this with another set of quotes. We did, it's on a different line, but Python can't see that because it goes line by line. So if we want to add in a new line at the end of this, we want to press enter or carriage return, you do backslash in, and that will get you a new line. So now if we say hello backslash in world, that will put a line in between hello and world. So let's see what that looks like. Oops, I didn't print it. Ooh, I should have had you guys tell me what I did wrong. I should have said, what happened? But I gave the answer away. It was because I didn't print it. Okay, so now if we do that, we have hello space backslash n or new line space world. And so you can kind of see that. That's why it's kind of cattywampus there, is because I added an extra space. So if you want to add a new line, that's backslash n. And there's a couple of these that you may want to know. Let's look at them. So backslash n adds a new line. Backslash t adds a tab. I don't see this one used as often, but if you see it in code, you'll know what it is. Backslash quote or backslash single quote will add that quotation mark. So either single quotes or double quotes. So it looks kind of weird, but the backslash cancels out the next character. So it's going to make that actually appear on screen for you. So we have quote, backslash, quote, quote to finish that out. It looks a little strange, but this is just doing backslash quote so that we can add a quote ourselves. What if you want to add a backslash? We can't add a backslash because Python recognizes that as the escape symbol. And so if you want to actually see a backslash in your output, you need to do backslash backslash, which is a little silly. So those are just some common escape characters that you may see when you're wanting to format your strings in Python. So are there any questions on escape characters or strings? And yes, thank you for pointing out where the backslash is, because sometimes that's hard to find on keyboards. Yes, backslash n is very useful. You will see it all the time. So any questions on strings or on anything that we've covered so far, like with these escape characters? Yes, Raymond.
Is there a good rule of thumb for when you would use, as example, okay, since it's going to ignore the first and then recognize the second with this native processing? Like on the bottom example, of course, it natively skips over one and registers the other, the one before it. Okay, you had to use extra quotation mark. Is there like a good general rule of thumb for, you know, more general purpose with that for more complex coding?
You mean just with
mean,
using escape characters?
Backslash quotation mark?
No, I mean like general purpose, like when do you know, how would you know whether or not a specific symbol would get you what you need, or whether or not it would be easier to use a dupe of a symbol so that after the first is passed over by Python, it'll recognize the second instance?
I think that got a little bit scrambled in your explanation of backslash quote.
Okay, yeah, I'll just go over that again. So if I'm just going to show that to you all in Replit, and thank you very much, both of you, for pointing that out. So Raymond, as per your question, as for like general uses, it's mostly just in strings, and it's kind of, you just have to either look them up or Google them or consult some kind of chart like I've given you. So \n is always going to be new line. So right now, if we want to say, I want to say I said hello in quotes. If I do that now, and of course, watch this work, and then Python proves me wrong, and I say print string 1. So string 1 equals I said hello. And so like in a book or something, you want to print out those quotation marks. Let's see what happens here. Invalid syntax. It says we cannot do that. We can't. You have way too many quotation marks going on here. And that is because we define our strings using quotation marks. So instead, if I want to put out double quotes, I'm going to have to escape them. I'm going to have to put a \, in front of them to be able to show them on the screen. And now, because I said \quote, it's going to know that's not the end of the string. That is me wanting to say literal quote. So now if I print this, it will say, I said hello with quotes. So does that make a little bit more sense?
Yes, Raymond also asked if it was more string oriented, the \, and yes, I believe so. \ sees most of its use in string values.
Yeah, that was what I was
Yes.
interested in, because, you know, like with other Python, you have to code a certain way because Python's going to skip over the actual first list and actually processes from the second after, you know, like when you use like iLook for an example. And so I was kind of curious about that kind of thing. And, you know, someone had mentioned it was mostly string specific. Because I was trying to think of ways I could integrate that to not have to do as much coding longhand, where it'd be like, okay, use a dupe, it'll skip the first one like it normally does. Then from the second occurrence on, I actually get all of it I want to process in a single line.
Okay, so I see what you're saying. And no, that's a bit past what we're doing right now. With this \ is used just purely for
Okay, I didn't know if the
strings.
concept was that generalizable or not. I apologize.
That's a really good question though. No, and that I only know of it used in strings. So I don't hear of it used like outside it, like you were saying, like with going through lists and stuff. But that's a really great question of seeing, you know, does this concept apply elsewhere as well? I love it. Yes, Pammy, I think I saw you raised your hand.
Tammy, are you able to speak to us? I think they may
It always
be
sounds like we're in
sending
a
their question through the
seance.
chat. Just
Okay.
give them a little bit to send it through.
Yes, Pammy, if you have a question, feel free to speak up or put it in the chat for us and we will get to it. It's always funny when we're saying, are you there? Can you talk to us? Because it sounds like we're trying to speak to ghosts.
We sound like we're portal turrets.
We do.
The turrets from Portal where they lose track of the player.
Yeah, Okay, so Pammy, do reach out to us. We couldn't hear you if you were speaking. But yeah, so this escape character is just letting you put in whatever character is after it, it will print that out. So it's specifically for ones that Python uses for something else, like in strings, for quotes. So if we want to put those quotes in, so let's say I want to add a new line after this, I'm going to do \n hello again, and it will print out, I said hello, hello. And you can see it has this extra space here. That's because I added a space in between the \n and the hello. So if I don't want it to do that, I get rid of that space here. And now it just puts it on the first character of that new line. Yeah, so that's a great question. So we had a question on when would you use \n? This is just when you want.
Help answer this question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in the situation I use \n the most is when I want to include line spacings for printing out one string value. So normally if you print it out to the console just as the entire body of text without \n, you'll see in the console when it outputs, there's gonna be a lot of breakage in the words, because the way the console fills out in most situations is that it'll continually fill the screen with text until it hits the border, and then it'll just keep going to the next line without recognizing the words. So you'll probably have like H and then LO into the next line. So what you can do is essentially like break it into different lines so that you don't have to make a new print function for every single
I get it.
single
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, sorry, it was because it was just confusing me. I was just trying to figure out how and what context one would use that in, but that makes perfect sense. Thank you so much. And sorry, you couldn't hear me because I forgot to put my mic up and I was just talking. I was like, they can't hear me. So
Oh,
apologies,
no.
everyone.
No,
But
no worries.
no, thank you. That makes perfect
Technology
sense.
is so goofy. That happens to me all the time. We're all good.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Safe space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And-
Yeah, I'm really glad we were able to answer that. Thank you so much, Brenton, and thank you, Pammy, for asking your question. So
My
just to
favorite way
illustrate,
to implement this too is like you store the \n like in the string variable, and then all you have to do on that whole paragraph is to just print this variable, and you'll
Yeah.
have a clear body of text on the screen. No word breakages.
Yes, and so just to illustrate what Brennan is talking about when they say word breakages, it's in something like this. You can see, depending on the size of your console, the console will just kind of wrap those words around, and it is kind of hard to read. So in this case, I just have hello written a bunch, but you can see here at the end it says hello, hello on the next line, and that's because it's just trying to print it all out. And if our console was wide enough, it would all be one line. So see, now it's not wide enough. And that's because we don't have any new line characters to tell it to go to another line. So if we want to break that up, we could add some \ns in here and let it break that up so that we don't get interruptions in our output. So I'm just peppering in some \ns. And we can see that makes it a bit nicer. So it still has some up here, and then you could adjust if you wanted. So that's kind of why you would use \n in that case. Awesome, awesome. So I see we're close to the end of our time here, so I'll go ahead and wrap up. We've mostly gotten through what I wanted to get through. Actually, we got a bit further because you guys were really understanding a lot. So I'm really glad for that. I'll go ahead and put this assignment that you can think about for next class. If you don't finish it, that's totally fine. You can also try to use ChatGPT to help you with this, but I believe we covered up to this. So your assignment, which I will, well, let's just get a poll real quick. If you would rather have this assignment done by Thursday's class and go over it on Thursday, put a green check mark as your reaction, or if you would rather have this assignment, we go over it. Well, next Tuesday I won't be here. Okay, here, green check marks if you're okay with trying to do this by Thursday or following along as we do it together by Thursday. Just give me a green check mark if that's okay with you. Red X if you're like, no, don't do that. And you can do a green check mark in participants. And if you don't feel strongly either way about it, then that's okay too. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of support for this. So if you do have trouble and you're not able to finish it on time, that's okay. But I have this assignment for you to look over, and then I will, at the end of Thursday's class, I'll go over how we can do this. I really enjoyed today's class. Thank you so much, everyone. It went by really fast. So apologies, I'm a minute past. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. And I can stay on for maybe 10 or 15 minutes if you guys have questions. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then you are free to either go and I will see you on Thursday, or stay around and ask some questions.
Bye.